Hello everyone, today I'm gonna be going over our mastery tier list. I'll be over explaining why things are where they are, and don't get triggered if something is down or whatever. It doesn't mean it's unplayable, it just means that we don't really recommend it, as the classes don't really offer much dispatch, in my opinion, or opinion rather, right? So I'm gonna start from the bottom. So Shaman, I mean, it's the oldest ability, it's the oldest mastery in the game rather. It has some cool builds that you can do with Totem Pop, and you can do Storm Totem now that got buffed. But I think aside from those builds that you can, for the most part, play on other masteries except Storm Totem, right? It's not really, it's a bit of a niche class. It has some cool interactions, but the devs have announced that they're gonna work on it. So I would advise you to stay away from it. Not so much because it's like super bad, which kind of is, but because it's gonna be probably completely reworked in the future, and I'm sure Shaman will have its time to shine. Then Spellblade. Spellblade is just dog shit. It had one build that people enjoyed playing. There's other builds that are just using bugs, so we don't really include those. And I mean, if you want to play a melee class, why would you play a Spellblade over anything else above it, right? Other than just the fantasy. I just think it's really bad. You can still make things work with the changes to Firebrand crit and so on. But I don't know, I'm not a really big fan. It takes so much setup, you're super squishy. Anything that you can do with Spellblade, ward, regen, armor, melee, anything you can think of, you can do better with other classes. So I just wouldn't bother with Spellblade, because it's just not really, again, it used to be a very beginner friendly build because you could just do the Flame Brief build, but I don't think there's, I mean, it's a niche class, there's things to explore here that are unexplored, but I wouldn't play it over the other classes. There's not a clear build that makes me want to put this on B. Then we will go to the B tier. The B tier is pretty decent. Just because it means B tier, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means compared to the other stuff is worst, right? So ForgeGuard, has some niche builds like Manifest Armage, which got giga nerfed with the ricochet change, right? That it no longer ricochets the way it used to do. The minions are okay. You can Smelter's Rat and some of the other abilities have got some crazy buff, like giving you 40% more endurance when channeling and things like that. And I'm sure people are gonna figure out things. But Sentinel as a whole has got kind of like gutted dispatch. It's still gonna be okay, but compared to what it used to be and the convenience you had before, it's not the same. You lost the armor from Sigils, which is endurance, which, in the end game it might be a slight buff on HP, but early on it's kind of like a bit of a downside. You still have no access to the R, they nerf Bastion, they nerf traversal skills, so if you're using something like Shield Rush for movement, like when it doesn't go on cooldown until you finish shield rushing, so you can't just chain shield rushes like before. They removed the crit avoidance from the implicits, and by far the new implicits for Sentinel are the worst of the new patch. If you compare it to the new implicits of that Mage God, that Necromant, that Leech God, that Druid God, like Sentinel God, just the short end of the stick really. It's still okay, but I mean, still playable, it's okay. Void Knight, I mean, it had a really good build, which was like Echo Warpath and Autobomber, and they're both been severely hit. I think the Barren Orb, we'll see, maybe with all the cooldown changes, it's still as it goes as it used to be, and maybe I'm underestimating it. But other than that, I mean, you play Void Knight, you're playing Echo Warpath, or you're playing Autobomber. The Sigil stuff hurts a lot, builds like Abyssal Echoes, etc. It's still good, but I don't know why would you play those builds other than just because you like the fantasy and they're fun. Like, you can play builds that do the same, they have the same type of clear, they're faster, and while also being 10 times tankier. So, again, Void Knight can get a lot of HP, but that's all you get, right? Beastmaster, I mean, Beastmaster has some niche builds, like Solo Companion can be good. Squirrels it's obviously an S tier build, but I think the mastery as a whole, I don't know, maybe people figure out new things with the new Sabertooth, a lot of the new pets. Again, this is kind of like a question mark for me. I do think that squirrels are definitely on top of S tier, but the mastery as a whole, like, if you're playing Beastmaster, you're playing squirrels, and I wouldn't really bother with anything else, in my personal opinion. Paladin on a group scenario probably goes a bit up, because of all the buffs you provide to the party. But as a standalone, it has a very good starting point. You can play Holy Trail, you can play Hammers, you can play a lot of really Electrify, a lot of like really good starting builds, like crit hammers, right? But then you just fall off, really. It's really hard to to get to the level that these classes are getting. So if Paladin scaled better, it could be on S, but I just don't think you are not beating on any department these classes with a Paladin other than supporting, obviously, right? But on a solo environment, you're just not, like, especially when we get to these points, I'll argue why these are here. Marksman, for me it used to be S tier, but it's got quite a big hit with the crit vulnerability, especially for builds like Bow Mage, etc., because it's hard to get spell crit. I think things like multi-shot, detonate arrow, especially with the new lightning bow base that have added into the game, the new flat cold damage that is added into the game, and some of changes that you guys will see when the patch drops. It's still relevant, it's still good, you can still get extremely survival with this class just because how you can juggle around your movement skills, your dodge, you can go full HP, you have a shit ton of sustain, like the shrouds are just crazy. Again, Marksman is surprisingly tanky. A lot of people don't seem to think this, but it's surprisingly tanky. And if you don't believe me, just, well, I've been rank 1 marksman on arena. Tank has been rank 1 marksman with a different build, Hell of Arrows, and the reason those builds push is because they're extremely survival, not because they do a lot of damage. Like, that build was doing 80k crits, but you can die. You can die. You have 3 dashes, you have shrouds, you have infinite dodge, you have infinite armor because shurikens. Well, not infinite, but you know what I'm saying. You get HP idols on marksman. Like, it's actually pretty cracked, but you have to build it properly, right? If you get out of the thing that works on marksman, then yeah, then it sucks. But you can say the same about all of the builds. Blade Dancer, again, Blade Dancer is probably the fastest class in the game, but I don't think it can really compete versus these characters in terms of arena pushing, bossing, and just overall performance. Again, Blade Dancer is still really solid, especially as a starter. But again, you're not gonna beat these classes. Like, you're just not. Still fun, you know. They nerfed crit vulnerability a lot, so you're kind of stuck playing either dots or shadow daggers, and shadow daggers have always been good, right? And until they change them, they will always be good. But yeah, Blade Dancer really solid. Still probably if you're a beginner, these two are actually probably the soliest picks in the tier list. But if you're a veteran player, if you know what you're doing, these classes are just crazy. We're talking that these classes are gonna, you know, they're gonna get to 500, 600, maybe 700 waves, and these guys can do 1,000, you know. Obviously, if the servers work, because that's gonna affect how people perform in the arena. Like, I already experienced that on my own hands. And then we have the S tier. Again, in my opinion, Necromancer is just on top of the top. Mainly because, I mean, there's going to be a race today for the event. And if you don't think these two classes are the ones that are going to win, I don't know what to say. Necromancer is just crazy. First of all, it has Abomination, which is the most broken build in the game. And the way ESG is balancing it is by making it super unpleasant to play. Again, I haven't made a max roll build guide about Abomination because I don't think it's a fun playstyle that I want to promote, and I think it's something like the devs need to probably figure out. But I mean, you can just Google it. I'm sure other content creators are gonna make them, and I'm sure also it's gonna get fixed because the devs will have to when everyone's playing this shit and abusing it. Necromancer also, though, if you nerf Abomination to the ground, if Abomination didn't exist, it's still S tier. You have Retaliation Golem, that right now is just crazy with Twisted Heart of Ukaros. You just get 20k ward and shit, right? You have Roid Mage, which is a crazy starter, super good also with the new set of the cold thingy. You have Raids, which is just, I mean, if you played Raids, you know what I'm saying. Again, I think the only actually bad build the Necro has is like just the starter build, like the army of Necros and stuff, but everything else just looks crazy. Lots of fun toys coming for Necromancer and Leech in general. Very good new implicits with cooldown reduction, with all res, etc, etc. Dude, Leech is looking tasty. Again, it has access to HP idols, it has access to Fear, Mark for Death. On a solo environment, again, you don't have to worry about crit. It's just crazy, you know. Necromancer, I think it's just nuts, and especially with all the changes to cooldown and the cooldowns and the new bases with cooldown and the changes to traversal skills, etc. I mean, I was testing my Necromancer and I had like a 3-second transplant with full haste. You know, you're fucking zooming. It's actually with gear this class just like ramp. It's nuts. And again, you are not beating a Necromancer in any department with any of these classes, other than again party play, right? Sorcerer, again, Sorcerer for me, it wasn't. It's one of those classes that you need to be good at the game and you need to know what you're doing for it to shine. But the reason we put it on S tier is because there's this new node called Forgotten Knowledge. Well, it's an old node, but it's got reworked. And what it basically does is that it gives you, if you put 10 points in it, it gives you 10 ward per 10 ward spent. So, you know, sorry, for 10, you get every time you use a 40 mana cost ability, you get for each point of mana that you have, you get a point of ward. With 10 points, it's basically 10 to 10 exchange, so it's a 1-to-1, right? So if you have 1,000 mana and you cast Glacier, you get 1,000 ward. You build mana, so you get mana back because you get mana on crit, and then you get ward, and then you consume it with Twisted Heart, which you leech, and then you get ward. I tested this and I had 25k ward. So again, Sorcerer, again, if this gets hotfix, it might go down a bit, but I mean, it is intended. Sorcerer also has very, very good builds, very good leveling. Again, Glacier, Static Orb, Elinova, even Fireball is fun to play. It's definitely not a top build, but again, Sorcerer is just solid. If you stay away from some of the niche skills, the old ones like Orb, etc. Again, Sorcerer just got crazy buffs with implicits. Like the new implicits are crazy. The new passive tree is fucking crazy. Like the new Arcane Momentum or whatever that gives you 16 spell damage per stack and cast speed. And this class, it's probably the most buffed out of the entire patch, and that's why it's on S tier. And if you don't believe me, I'm probably gonna play Glacier, so you guys will see what I mean when you see it. Again, some people just don't have the information, so they're making misjudgments. Leech, I mean, Leech is just always gonna be strong. 2 dashes, Reperform, Dead Seal. What to say about Leech, you know? It's just one of those that is just really good. Tons of builds that are viable. You can play Hungering Souls, you can play Sacrifice, you can play Ripblood with the new Ripblood, which is probably the best version that I'm actually currently working on. You can play even Marrow Shards for Arena. Not so much for mapping, you know, it's a bit of a weird skill. But in Arena, it's been rank 1 3 patches in a row. So, yeah. Leech is really strong, really fun to play, and really high skill cap. And actually surprisingly tanky, because you can combine you know, the Reliquary of Death or whatever, the passive that gives you DR, with Dead Seal DR, with Armor, with Bone Armor DR, and with Grimoire DR. So you're basically fucking immortal whenever you use a potion and you're on Dead Seal. So again, don't underestimate Leech. Even though your HP is low, your EHP is actually pretty crazy, okay? And then we have Druid, which is just like, I think you can't really go wrong with Druid. Has tons of builds. You can play big spells, you can play Totem, you can play single minion, you can play Swipe, you can play Cold Werebear, you can play Earthquake. I mean, Gardens of Rage change didn't really matter. I've been testing. You don't even need it. You don't even need it for a lot of the builds, like Swipe and Cold Werebear. I tested because Cold Werebear was bugged before and it was using way more mana than intended. So I was testing, and even just with the rage nodes on Werebear form, you don't even need any rage generation other than that for that build. And yeah, the new implicits are fucking crazy. You're getting 12% increased health and CDR on your items and on your chest and on your helmet. And yeah, overall, next to the Sorcerer, the biggest benefits from all the buffs and the changes. And again, Swipe, Druid just has so many mechanics that are broken. Swarmblade, again, we have a leveling guide that uses Swarmblade. I didn't have time to cover Swarmblade because there was so many changes that I didn't have time to do it. But again, it's a build that is covered with other content creators like Amarathi and Bina and etc. So make sure you check it out from them. But yeah, this is why the tier list is how it is. Again, this doesn't mean Beastmaster doesn't have an S tier build. This doesn't mean that Necromancer doesn't have bad builds, but this is my overall thoughts and my overall recommendations for new players who are looking to look for a class that, hey, you know what, I can play this class and I'm not gonna play one build and I'm gonna regret my life. I can play this class and I can use it to gear other classes. I can respec, play different builds, and overall I'm gonna have a good time. And my time, if you know, not everyone can play all the classes, so it's more of like what I think as a new people should spend their time on this patch. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this is explanatory. And again, if you disagree with me in any of what I've said, wait for the patch notes. See ya.